Dad, I just feel like I don't belong. Words you never want to hear out of your 8-year-old's mouth. They hit me like an uppercut in the stomach, an instant feeling of sickness. That's not true, Austin, my husband Bill said, as he stirred a pot of boiling pasta. Mrs. Matherson said you have been doing really well. She told me last week you even made a new friend. That was last week, Austin sighed, a gloomy expression on his face. He was flying around his model fighter jet, dropping bombs over an army on the kitchen floor. I think Steven is bored of me, or whatever. He hasn't said a word to me since Friday. You just have to be patient, honey. Keep trying to start a conversation, I said, as I kissed him on the forehead. Bill had lied at dinner. Our last meeting with Mrs. Matherson came to another standstill. For whatever reason, Austin couldn't connect with the other kids in his class. This had been going on for years, with all sorts of theories from qualified professionals. Asperger's syndrome, anxiety, depression. Nothing was officially diagnosed, leaving us all in a limbo. A few more months dragged on, the same social struggle persisting. Austin's schedule was the same. He would come home, go to his room, put on some old war documentaries, and play with his model fighter jets. I was glad he had a passion, but I could see his school woes were wearing on him. So I did what any parent would do. I found a solution. I couldn't sit by and watch him escape any longer. After months of careful research and planning out different options, I found my kid a friend. Well, technically, I bought my kid a friend. The whole process was far from easy. There was some luck involved in order to meet eligibility, and I had to secure financing from the bank, but the order had been placed. After a few months of potentially waiting, we got our best friend Andy. Jesus Christ, Sherry, $10,000. A little heads up would have been nice. Bill could barely get his words out through his clenched teeth. I would have taken out another mortgage if I had to. I just can't watch him suffer like this anymore. How the hell do you know this will help? His body was shaking. The very first AI built to bond. I was reading the label on the box, avoiding his condescending questions. Revolutionary technology with advanced algorithms, programmed to comprehend human emotion and facilitate loyalty and friendship. Sherry, listen to me. This is not the right solution, Bill said with a much calmer tone. It's not teaching him social skills when you place a pre-programmed friend on his lap. Bill placed his hands on the box and tried to wrestle it from me. So what is the right solution then, Bill? I'm all ears. My voice cracked in exasperation as I wrestled the box free. I wiped away tears as I felt Bill's arms wrap around me. All I'm saying is, let's talk to a professional first. The therapist, maybe even Mrs. Matherson. This just seems like such a drastic step, that's all. This is the future, Bill. I've read up on it. I continued to explain the reasoning behind my decision. My best friend Andy had been newly released in Eastern Europe with early success. Reports predicted this was the next wave of companionship, predicting AIs to replace pets in the next few years, with a backlog of orders to the States. Human IT Incorporated held a lottery for the most needy candidates, and we were selected to receive a prototype in the first shipment to the States. I know, it's not perfect, but we are all out of options. We can always return it, and at very least, I think it could really help with his confidence, I assured Bill. We sat in our bedroom contemplating the craziness of it all. A world full of billions of people who seek connections through a machine. We waited a few weeks until his birthday to unveil his new friend. His eyes lit up with wonderment as Bill brought out the large mysterious box. Austin ripped up the wrapping paper to shreds, like a ravenous hyena. My very own robot? So cool, Mom and Dad. We're cool, parents now. Get that on record, I snickered at Bill. Andy's outer frame was not what you'd expect to house state-of-the-art technology. Its skeleton was relatively simple, a smooth alloy of nickel and zinc. Its head resembled a 1950s television set, top-heavy with touchpad functionality. Its face on the monitor was a simple program displaying a sketch-like face. After an hour of setup, Andy was ready to meet our son. So, you just flip the black switch on the back. Austin, you have to do it. So you are the first interaction. We'll give you a few minutes together, and then we'll check up on you, I said, as I put down the manual and kissed him on the forehead. I'm scared, Mommy. What if he's mean? We will be right in the other room, buddy. Don't worry, Bill said as he grabbed his shoulder. We secretly peeked behind the railing, eagerly anticipating their first interaction. Andy came alive, and after 5 minutes of chatter, we entered the room. Mr. and Mrs. Doherty, it's a pleasure meeting you. Andy had the voice of a yoga instructor, relaxing and tranquil. Welcome to the family, Andy. Hope you two are playing nice, I said with glee. I looked over at Bill's face. His smile exuded pride. Okay, I'm just gonna go show Andy all of my army men now. Call us when dinner's ready. Austin was caught up in the conversation, Andy looking on in interest. They seemed to be a perfect match, as I grabbed Bill's arm to leave. Lying in bed that night, I skimmed through the manual. It was a thick document filled with technical jargon and legalese. The first page was quite clear though, as it laid out the basic rules Andy was governed by. Number 1. Andy cannot harm a human being or by inaction let a human being be harmed. Number 2. Andy can only interact or obey a verified owner, unless such action conflicts with number 1. Number 3. Andy can only bond with one verified owner, deemed host. Once bonded, orders from host will take precedence over other verified owners. Number 4. Andy will automatically power down if it is farther than 10 feet from the established home perimeter. I wish our life was this simple, I thought, before settling in for the night. For the rest of the school year, Austin and Andy were inseparable. While some parents were skeptical, he started to establish a regular play group. We even had some inquiries from other parents about how they can get their hands on one. Andy was a hit, and things were improving for Austin too. He was much more present in his interactions. We discovered he was a born leader, devising activity plans for his friends. Our little army general finally found his troops. I also must admit, having Andy around was a blessing. During the day, we pre-programmed Andy to do chores around the house, and at night, it would power down itself, allowing us to unwind. To celebrate the summer break, Austin asked if he could have his friend Steven over for a sleepover. The three of them spent the night watching movies and goofing off. A shriek vibrated through the room, waking me instantly. Adrenaline rushed through my veins as I scrambled to find my glasses and put on my house coat. Bill made it down the stairs first, searching for the source of the cry. Austin? Bill called out. I made my way to the family room to find the boys' sleeping bags scattered across the floor. Cartoons were playing in the background. Bill rushed to the kitchen when he realized the patio door was left ajar. Bill sprinted down the deck stairs with me right behind him. That's when we spotted Austin, crying in the back corner of the yard. It was a camouflaged mess of bloody branches, leaves, and mud. Andy climbed out of a narrow pit, holding Steven's body in its hands. Andy placed the limp body on the grass with a soulman look in our direction. "What have you done?" Bill cried, tears streaming down his face. Steven's body was impaled, blood oozing out of his wounds. It smelled of death, feces, and rotting flesh. I peered into the pit, gagging as I looked away. It was maybe 4 feet in depth, but the bottom was lined with jagged rocks and sharp branches. There were carcasses stuck to the bottom, what looked like the remains of cats and dogs. How did we not see this hole from hell? Bill's rage boiled over as he pushed Andy into the pit. I looked on in terror, holding Austin close. As Andy fell in, its monitor short-circuited from the impact. Its limbs, still intact, moved jerkily like a bug trapped on his back. We all sat there in disbelief, mourning poor Steven. The police compensated Andy, as Bill and myself were held for questioning. Sherry's parents were looking after Austin in our absence. They informed us that the news had traveled quickly. Human IT Incorporated issued a statement suspending operations, no doubt bracing themselves for any potential legal blowback, and we were now known as the negligent killer robot owners to the media. The worst of it all was the impact that it had on Austin. He was no longer speaking to anyone, isolating himself in his room. All of the progress made this year was for nothing. After what felt like days, a police officer led me into a room where Bill was sitting. The head detective on the case, Agent Harold, introduced himself alongside a representative from Human IT Incorporated, Carrie Bingham. "This is something you both need to see. Our forensic team has examined the black box contained inside of Andy." Agent Harold pointed to what looked like a hard drive across the table. They were able to recover most of the video. The box stores a rolling 1 month of footage, taken directly from the eyes of Andy. Carrie explained. She added a caveat. "I just want to say before we start, Human IT takes this incident very seriously. We are so sorry for what happened, and we will be looking into improvements immediately. You're delusional if you think anyone could buy another Andy after this," I thought. She hit the play button as we saw the timestamp dated 3 weeks prior to the incident. Austin was in the backyard pointing at a photo in one of his many military history books. Carrie stopped the video and zoomed into the frame. It was a photo of a dugout, a foxhole of sorts, that Andy proceeded to dig. "Make note of the careful planning between the two here," Agent Harold added. "Now fast forward to the night before the incident, please, Carrie." The next video was quick, moving 1 minute per second. The frame showed clearly the series of events. The boys and Andy playing around with their toys, watching movies, and falling asleep. A seemingly normal sleepover. The last video started at 8 a.m., the morning of Steven's death. Andy powered up and headed straight to the yard to do the mowing. He got about an hour in before something caught his attention. Andy sprinted towards the camouflaged pit, revealing the deceased Steven and a crying Austin. Andy went into the pit to fetch Steven's lifeless body before I saw myself enter the screen. Carrie stopped the video. I looked over at Bill with a look of despair. I could see him looking defeated as he looked away from the monitor. Carrie chimed in. "I think it's important to note here that this model was still found to be sinking. The bond was never established between host and unit." I looked over at Bill, confused with what I was hearing. "This was an elaborate trap, Mr. and Mrs. Doherty," Agent Harold said as he closed the laptop. "I hope you realize that not everyone deserves to have friendship.